Hi, SusanClaire here, Gourmet Quilter. I'm popping back in with things from the Quilter's Scrap Pantry or the Leftovers Pantry. Today it's all about what is a half square triangle. Well, a half square triangle is, as it indicates, half of a square, and it's a triangle. So usually it looks something like this. So it's a square of fabric or two fabrics, and we've joined them together on the diagonal. And again, you can make them any size you like, any colors you like. We can have tiny little ones, we can have much bigger ones. They can be part of another block, they can be used on their own. There's so many ways of using a half square triangle. They're not hard to make. You need two squares to start with, and out of that you'll get two of these units, and I'll show you how to do that. So this is featured in my book, The Quilter's Scrap Pantry. So this is my pantry with all my leftovers and things. So I'm doing a whole lot of things on leftovers this year, but it's not just about leftovers. This is just a technique, or a unit as I call it. So in the book we've broken it down into various units and things, and this is the half square triangle unit. It tells you a little bit about how to make it. There's also a chart in the book about the sizes that you would cut the square to end up with the size that you'll end up with. So on the quilt behind me, this is made from half square triangle units. All this dark grey colour here is actually triangles. So this is the half square triangle unit, and it's repeated and then just they're turned around, and so you can do quite a lot of different things with half square triangle units. So let's get started on making one. So ideally we start with two squares the same size. I have here two 5-inch squares, and the best way I found to make these units is to draw a diagonal line. Put two squares right sides together, like I've got there, draw a diagonal line from point to point, and then we're going to sew. And I have done the sewing already, but the thread is much the same colour as the fabric, so you may not see the stitching. You're sewing 1/4 of an inch away from that line, either side of that line. So the line that we're marking is actually going to be our cutting line. So you can see here my stitching lines are here, and we're going to cut halfway between them on that line that I've drawn. So as I said, this is 5-inch squares that I found were a good size, but you can use any size square. It's just going to, of course, affect what size it comes out at the end. So I'm just going to bring the iron over and press that now. You can press the seam open if you'd like to, or you can press it to one side. I'm going to go to one side, to the darker colour. So you start out with two squares and you end up with two of these units. It's just that because you've done some sewing and cutting, they're going to be a little bit smaller than they started out. So there I've got my two units, but they do need trimming now just to be an exact size and a nice uniform size, because it's an amazing thing with fabric that things move, and sometimes they're the same size as you're expecting and sometimes they just aren't. So I'm going to trim this down. It started as two 5-inch squares. We're going to trim it to measure 4.5 inches now. So you're losing half an inch basically when you do this method. And so I'm going to use this 5-inch square, and I'm going to position it so that this diagonal line here sits along my diagonal line of the square there. And I'm going to position it so that my 4.5-inch mark sits within, and it should just sit within all the way around. And we should just be trimming off just a whisker. It may not even be as much as 1/8 of an inch, but just make sure that your diagonal line sits right on that seam line. And so if you just trim off two sides, as I said, it's just a little whisker that we're trimming off, nothing very much at all. And then if you turn that around, reposition the ruler, and this time in this 4.5-inch mark should line up exactly on that edge, not within the square. So again, this line should sit right on your diagonal, and this 4.5-inch line or marks should fit right on the edge of where you've just trimmed. And now we trim the other two sides, and we have got a very beautiful 4.5-inch square that is now a 1/2-inch square triangle unit, ready to use as is, as in the quilt behind me, or it might be to use as part of another block, all sorts of things like that. So there's a download on my website on GourmetQuilter.com with the information about half square triangle units a separate page if you, in case you would like to make your own little ready reference. You could stick that on there, and that is our half square triangle unit. Thank you. I will see you again with some other things later on.